karate for years. And over the years, I've often wondered, could karate be improved? Today, I want to talk about how I think Jiujitsu can improve karate. Hey, what's up? I'm Ken. This is KenfuTV, and each week I release videos in the martial arts, philosophy, technique, training, that sort of thing. So if that's the kind of thing you're into, I hope you stick around. I hope that you subscribe. I hope that you realize that I've just launched a new membership program where you can get videos straight from the mat, things that I'm teaching as I teach them. And this last week, I hope you enjoyed seeing a sneak peek of all that. I wasn't feeling very good. Released a whole bunch of videos from that series, but there's many more. I record 4 to 6 videos a week from the mat. Lessons, how I teach them. Check the link in the description for how to sign up, how to become a member, and how to gain access to that and much, much more. Today we're talking about Jiu-Jitsu, specifically how Jiu-Jitsu could improve karate, how I think that it can improve karate. And to keep it simple, and because people like lists of things, it's going to be 5 ways that I think Jiu-Jitsu could improve karate. First off, I think karate has so much to offer. I'm not in any way saying that karate is deficient. I just think that the ways that we train it can be, and I also think that depending on the school you train in, that there's a lot of room for improvement. So let's jump into it, and let's jump into it by defining how I view karate. I view karate as an Okinawan martial art percussive grappling system, heavily striking based, but with an emphasis on gripping and controlling an opponent in order to maintain a level of control as best suited to dealing with non-consensual violence, not sport, but non-consensual violence. Among that is the idea of the ranking systems and how ranks work and how promotion and skill development works. Over time, there's a lot of different ways that this gets approached. Different schools handle it different ways. I can only speak from my own perspective, but I have one of those, so we'll talk about it today. The first thing that I think karate can steal from Jiu-Jitsu is its all-in training method. The idea that the instruction, then the drilling, then the sparring, all contain the same material, trained the same way. That's something I don't always see being really easy to do in karate. What I mean is the way the instruction works, and then the escalation up into drilling and the escalation up into sparring. A lot of times things are lost. How it's done through training and drilling can kind of be similar, but then all of a sudden you're sparring, and half the time you can't hit the techniques you're trying to hit. And it's not for lack of trying or lack of skill, it's for lack of it being a conducive environment. I believe that sparring in karate is struggling. I think that we're in a place where it's getting better, but sparring in karate has gotten very good at being sparring karate versus karate. I will be the first to tell you that I think karate is something that was never meant to go against another karate practitioner. It just wasn't. And there are things said by people who we recognize as notable names in karate and its history that will go as far as to say the same thing and say this is not meant for that. Villains and ruffians, I think it was said by one of them. This is for defending oneself against villains and ruffians, not our fellow karateka. So the way that we spar is problematic. Jiu-Jitsu, you're instructed on exactly the way to do it, that you then drill exactly the way you were instructed, and then you move into rolling, which is sparring, and you train it and do it and execute it in the exact same way that you drilled it. Now, exact varies, and we'll get to that later, but that's the thing. When you start sparring, the opportunities that arise are the same opportunities that you tested in drilling. Karate, not so much. You've got different opportunities, different things that you work, and then you spar, and the context is different, and therefore hitting those techniques is harder. Because it's harder, you go for the things that work. And because you go for the things that work, you get good at those things that are good against your fellow man, your consensual violence dueling partner. And you don't get good at being able to land this technique the way that it was designed because you're not practicing the technique. You're practicing something else. That leads me to number 2. Number 2 is strongly connected to number 1, and that's that everything is pressure tested. You roll, you do it, you have to achieve it against a resistant partner, and that's how you learn and that's how you train. You're able to ramp up the pressure progressively while you roll. As you roll with different people, you're able to do that, and because there's constant contact and constant pressure and constant ways that you're working with your partner, that you can do that really safely. You can elevate and escalate your technique to something that becomes more difficult to manage or more successful or whatever it needs to be, but you're able to do it gradually. We need a way to have all of the art be pressure tested, be utilized in a sparring and resistant partner method that's non-consensual. Because in order for it to truly work, in order to be able to do it, you've got to be really good at it, and you've got to be able to practice it. For example, when I was first started sparring, it was always the long-range karateka versus karateka sparring. It wasn't until I introduced the grappling part of the art into the sparring that I realized that all those techniques that I just could not hit were indeed available. They were 100% trainable. Whereas before, you had to work so hard to try to do it, and you had to play tricks and games to make it happen. And it just wasn't conducive to the training. I didn't feel like it was very successful that way. Number 3 is it's not what you know. It's how well you can do it. There's a lot of material, but it's what you become good at, and how you're measured entirely on your ability to perform, not on your ability to maintain a curriculum. We'll jump to that in a minute, but this idea that how well you do it is everything. The escalation in your skill, the recognition of your skill, comes from how hard you work at getting good at doing those things. Everything that you train, you have to be able to do well. What you do and how you do it is the skill. It's the skill. And that is a critical component to being able to excel, and I think that karate needs to spend more time focused on that. So much so that we'll jump to number 4. It's about building the person, not a repository of knowledge. You will gather knowledge and you will contain it, and you will pass that on to other people. But the progression is about building the person. In fact, you could say that the system itself is a reductionist system. It reduces in what you know over time. You start off learning a lot, somewhere 50, 60, 70 techniques or so, from white to blue, that kind of thing. And yeah, that sounds like a lot of material, but that material is just the foundation, the base of the pyramid, so to speak. Over time, as you progress through the belt ranks, the emphasis is on your individuality. This takes time, but it's also exactly the opposite of the way karate does it. Karate starts with a small amount and then adds more. It's this upside down pyramid idea where you start with a little bit and you get good at it, and then you add more, 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 and you just keep adding. And because you keep adding, it becomes really difficult to actually manage how much you retain of all that information. I know I've done it. There's a lot of things that later on I go, I forgot about that. And it's not because I didn't care about it, because there was so much that you get pulled one direction and then you lose sight of a different direction. This is true so much so that in a lot of schools, your ability to progress, especially after black belt, is based entirely on learning more stuff. The ranks are about, do you know more than you knew before? Jiu-Jitsu, in my experience, goes the opposite direction. Are you more skilled and have a higher level of mastery, a deeper understanding of what you have, rather than did you get more of it? You're not just going out, just collecting techniques. You're mastering some. You're digging deeper. You're spending time with those first 50, 60 techniques, and you're learning to excel at them through your training. Rick Ellis has an excellent video on the belt progression in Jiu-Jitsu, and I've linked it down below because I think that everybody should look at it. Just because, one, I think it's just a really well put together video on thoughts. If you do Jiu-Jitsu, it's just a really good way to look at how all of that works, and at least his perspective of it. But second is the idea of how that progression can look. And I think that maybe the belt progression is the thing that is the most interesting to me when it comes to maximizing efficiency in training karate. This idea of reduction, the idea of increasing skill. If you've watched some of my other videos, especially when it comes to rank and that kind of stuff, you know that I've already shifted away from some of that, and I've taken away needing to know lots of kata and lots of material to knowing less, knowing a foundation, and then something specific, and then digging deep in it, becoming specifically good at all the individual components of that, and becoming the master, the thing that nobody knows as good as you, because you've dedicated so much time to just that thing. I believe there's so much skill development there that exists in that idea. being able to study something so deeply that you can see all of the similarities rather than the differences allows you to unlock technique that doesn't even exist yet, or things that you don't know about. And I think we need a way to do that in karate. I think it needs to be encouraged and explored. Lastly, number 5, all of this boils down to the game. The term used to describe a person's ability to do what they do, what it looks like when they specifically do it. This idea of individuality, of building your own thing, of having a certain level of fundamentals, but choosing the ones that match you and progressing into that and building something that's uniquely you. Well, it's something that I think we need to spend more time with in karate. I think it's a very Okinawan idea. You'll possibly think that this contradicts with the shuhari model, and maybe it does a little bit, but I also think that the shuhari model is a very Japanese concept. This idea of learning to do everything exactly the same and then moving on from there. Instead, people are encouraged to become themselves early on. Honestly, I think that's a huge benefit to the practitioners and to the schools and to everybody involved when you're encouraged to be a unique and capable individual. In Jiu-Jitsu, you find people who are good at certain things. I need people to excel in individual skills because them excelling in individual skills is what helps me increase my knowledge and capability of the skills that I want to improve. So what do we need? How do we take all of this and make it into something useful for karate? Well, first, our training needs to be all-encompassing. It needs to be holistic. It needs to be a holistic training. We need to be able to work fundamentals. We need to be able to drill them. We need to be able to spar them, and we need to be able to work them live in ways that are all conducive and don't have a lot of disparity between each other. How I drill and how I perform need to be the same thing. My sparring needs to reflect the way that I drill technique. If I drill technique a certain way and sparring doesn't reflect that, either my sparring needs to be fixed or my drilling needs to be fixed. But these things need to come together. We've got to know that it works. And if our training doesn't include making sure that we're able to accomplish it and making sure that we're able to fail regularly, well, that's a big deal. In fact, so much so that I think a bonus number 6, a bonus 1 that equals 6, is the idea that failure is built in from day one. You're going to try, you're going to attempt what you're doing, and you're going to fail, but that's actually just built in part of it, and everybody understands that, and everybody works to improve, and your process continues to change as you become better at what you're doing, and that is the escalation. We've got to fail. We've got to fail frequently, and we've got to be encouraged to do so, and we've got to be supported and mentored, guided through how to learn from failure. Learning from failure is not something that's just automatically built in. It's something that we've got to do intentionally. Off of the idea that it's not what you know, it's how well you can perform it, we've got to make sure that our performance evaluations are based on that. Different schools have different ways of doing things, and sometimes they have a tendency to lean towards how well have you collected all of this information. Maybe you're not so perfect at it, but you have it. You got it roughly figured out. You can hold on to that. But the problem is you don't spend a lot of time on that. Then you start on to the next thing and adding more. So you're not necessarily fixing that problem. I think testing and evaluation needs to be much more performance-based. Did you do it? And to what level did you do it? And is that level adequate? That needs to be the criteria. That falls right into what we need to do to build the person and not the repository. We've got to make sure that we are spending the time making sure that the individual is excelling and improving in the ways that they need to, rather than just collecting more and more technique. Honestly, I think karate is due for a massive reduction in material. I don't think it should all go away. I just think how we store it and how it manifests is something that needs to be reassessed. The vision that I'm building of the perfect school, the perfect idea, is not one where there's a head instructor and a whole bunch of clones that are passing on that instructor's knowledge to yet another set of clones. Instead, I want to see a whole bunch of different people. Sure, you still need a head instructor, somebody who's responsible for keeping everything in alignment and making sure everything's going good. But that set of senior students, and those could be black belts, that's still a senior student. Some people lose sight of the fact that a black belt is still a student. Those people need to be unique and individual. So as somebody coming up through the ranks has the ability to improve a specific thing, that they start training with a person who can help them with that. You read some of the old books about the Okinawan masters, and they were all different. Every single one of them was different, and they trained with each other, and they fought and they sparred, and some of them were troublemakers and some of them weren't, but they were all unique. And if someone wanted to be good at a certain thing, then they went to train with the person who was good at that thing. And I don't think that has to be different schools. Well, I want to be good at that. I need to go to that school. I think that we have room to have that be individuals inside of the school. That's part of my dream. That's the idea, is to be able to go into a school, see a whole bunch of black belts around, and all of them have their own skill set that's unique to them. And when people come to train and they work with different people, they learn a lot because those people have a deep understanding of the skills that they possess. I think that also benefits the students because then they're recognized for the things that they excel at, rather than a pecking order hierarchy thing where somebody at a higher pecking order is the one teaching this thing when they're not the most qualified for it. I think we got to move away from that. And lastly, we got to encourage the game, the development of a game, of the way when people train and spar, that they do the things that they do, and all of their training, all of their constructive criticism and their coaching, all of that lends to them becoming better at them being them. That was probably one of the most useful things that I got when I went to train with Rick Ellis. Is he didn't come to look and see just what do you have of the criteria. He looked at the way I moved, what my game looked like, and said, here's what we can do to improve your game. I'd be willing to bet in a lot of ways that the stuff that he's working on for me doesn't even have anything to do with him. Doesn't have anything to do with half of his students, but it's specific to me, and it's something that he's making sure that I have. That's what I want to be able to do. That's something that I've strived for a long time. That's what I want to be able to do with students in my school. And that's what I think karate should be capable of doing. Build strong but unique individuals and let them develop their own game, their own way of doing things, and celebrate that. We need to not just acknowledge it. We need to make sure that it is embraced and celebrated, and that we're all paying attention so that we all know where these things are at. And if you decide you want to become good at that thing, do you know where to go to do it? What do you think? Do you think that jiu-jitsu, the things that I'm talking about, have a place in karate? Do you think that there are ways that we can do this? Or do you think I'm off base and that I'm taking things off track? Jump in the discussion down below and let's have a conversation about it. And drop in your thoughts. I want to hear what you think. These are just my ideas, the things that I'm thinking about, the things that I'm processing and thinking through. That doesn't make them right. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that it was beneficial to you, and I hope that you share it around with people that you think need to see it. If this is something that you agree with and you think we need to make these changes, I hope that you're sharing it with other people so you can start your own personal conversations with people that you maybe train with, so that you can start to process and figure out what your next steps are. If you're curious about the way that I do things and the way that I teach, I recently launched memberships to this YouTube channel. So you can hit that join link down below to get connected to that and be able to see videos of my training exactly as I do the way that I'm teaching the students. There's a lot of other perks, a lot of other things that I am really excited about for people who choose to be members. I've got a whole video about it that I'll link down below that goes through all of the different stuff that's happening in those memberships. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, I left a place where you can subscribe and a couple videos that you might like to watch too, just so that you can keep checking out what KenfuTV is all about. So that's it, I'm Ken. You've just been watching KenfuTV, and if you click on one of those links, you can watch a little bit more. Catch you in the next one.